All right, the live stream is up,
Okay, fantastic.
and now we are going to start recording. And then I'm gonna
All
let everyone.
right. And feel,
Are you ready for me to let everyone in?
sure, before you let everyone in, just feel free to highlight a question for me if people put questions in the chat.
Sounds good. I'm gonna start over with the recording so we can start clicking.
Sounds good.
All right.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you very much. I'm seeing people coming in and joining us, and we will get started in just a couple of minutes. But thank you for being here. I'm glad to see Maggie Cullerton Hooper is on deck, all ready and set to be our first candidate who's speaking today. So I'm glad to see that. I'm Eileen Dordek. If some of you don't know me, I will introduce myself again as we go along. It's 6:29, so I'll give people a little more time to come in. But I will go ahead. Actually, I can start with this part. Thank you all so much for coming tonight. We're really glad to have you. I'm Eileen Dordek. I am the president of the 47th Ward Democrats. And we have a large group of 47th Ward Democrat committee members who are going to be on this Zoom today. A way to get involved and be a part of our decision making around candidates, around endorsements, who we give our time to, who we canvass for, is to get involved with the 47th, show up to events, show up for our canvassing events, and really people who come, show up, have regularity, can be counted on, are people who become part of our organization and people who become important parts of our community. And they're the people who have the power in our organization. This is not an organization where you have to have an elected office, even though we have them too. It's not an organization where you have to give a lot of money. It's an organization where you work and get involved, and we want you to be a part of things. If you want to start something and run with it, we're that kind of organization where we love to see people take initiative, and we love having people be a part of that. So for those of you who are not already involved in 47th, if you're interested in getting more involved, we'd love to have you. I see more and more people coming in, which is great. I want to also start off by thanking, as always, our fearless leader, committee person, Paul Rosenfeld, who I see is on the Zoom, which is great. We appreciate it. I want to thank Marissa Miller, who makes all the trains run on time, is running technology today. She's the best. And Matt Kuzma, who is our king of communications. So thank you to all of those 47th Warriors for all the good work you do. What's going to happen tonight is we have 5 candidates. We're going to be hearing from all 5 candidates who have submitted petitions for the Chicago Public School Board 2nd District, which is in the northern part of the city. These candidates are in order of their interviews: Maggie Cullerton Hooper, then Ebony DeBerry, Kate Doyle, Daniel Kleinman, and Bruce Leon. We are giving each candidate 15 minutes. We're going to be tough on timing because this is going to be long enough, and we want people to be engaged and pay attention to the whole thing. So please, candidates, take about 5 minutes to introduce yourself, and then we'll have 10 minutes for questions from our community, from people on the committee. Feel free to submit questions in the chat, or feel free to raise your hand too. If somebody raises their hand and there aren't, a ton of people, I'd be happy to call on you, unmute yourself, and have you ask the question yourself. So that's going to be how things run. And I think we are about ready to get started. It looks, or we're still adding people. But Marissa is on top of that. So unless there is, Paul, do you have anything that you want to say before we get started, or should we just get going?
You did a great job. Thank you very much. Let's just go ahead. Thank you, Eileen.
Let's do it. All right. We are going to start with Maggie Cullerton Hooper. So Maggie, please unmute yourself, and we'll be here in about 5 minutes to ask you some questions.
Thank you so much for having me here. Hi, everyone. I'm Maggie Cullerton Hooper. I am a mom, I'm an activist, and I'm a public servant. So most importantly, I'm a single mom to 2 kids, first and third grade. They attend our Global Majority neighborhood school in Albany Park. I'm also a parent with disabilities to a child with an IEP. Because of that experience, I became a volunteer parent advocate. So I go with other parents and families during their IEP meetings and do my best to help ensure their kids get the accommodations they need to learn. I believe it's incredibly important that we have disability advocates who are both people with disabilities and SPED parents sitting on the Board of Education. I'm also a trained parent organizer with Raise Your Hand for Illinois. I've spent the last decade or so fighting alongside other CPS parents, students, and teachers, but ed organizing is not the only way that I work to build community. I'm a survivor of gender-based violence and have been a peer activist for fellow survivors for years. I'm on the board of Planned Parenthood, so a staunch advocate for reproductive justice and gender-affirming care for all ages. I am currently and have been deeply engaged in racial justice and equity organizing, and I have served on Hibbert Elementary's LSC for almost 8 years. So I started as a community rep, then obviously became a parent rep. Now I serve as the chair of the LSC. I've also dedicated my career to Chicago's nonprofit and government sectors, from Feeding America to Planned Parenthood to Loretto Hospital and a number of hyperlocal mutual aid type of CBOs. Most of my career was spent in education and health and human services nonprofits. But I continued my public service when I started working for the city of Chicago at DCASE. I was the deputy commissioner for partnerships and moved up from there to serve as the chief philanthropy and partnerships officer in City Hall. And in that role, I led teams across every single mayoral initiative and city department. That is not a job for one person, in case you were curious, but nonetheless, it did give me ample experience. I managed municipal budgets upward of $50 million, had to learn how to maximize the impact of limited funds. And at the end of the day, I really understand how government functions and where to cut through the you-know-what to create change. I continue to serve the city and fight for racial equity in my work with the Alliance for Black Equality, which is led by Dr. Alvin Tillery. I am certain that I am the best candidate to represent our community on Chicago's elected school board. I'm running for this seat because I know that my kid cannot succeed if every kid cannot succeed. I'm running because we need a leader who is a person with disabilities, that has a child with disabilities, and that has a proven track record of advocating for our kids within CPS's existing system. I'm running because I'm the only candidate with children currently enrolled in a CPS school, and because I belong to a community that is representative of the vast majority of District 2 CPS schools. So 31 of the 37 schools in 2 have majority low-income populations. In fact, there is only one neighborhood school that has under 20% low-income enrollment and majority white population. That's Waters. Whereas our neighborhood school, Hibbard, is over 71% low income and 8% white. It is the most incredible school. I love it so much. I love being in the building and around it. And I sought out this school and this community for my kids because I understand what that brings to my family. I think that we need a board member who represents our community and who sees our value and who chose us because of it. Parents of CPS students, we have been gaslit for years. In reality, I think our system is capable of so much more than we get right now. We can absolutely reform special education funding. We can absolutely overcome a budget deficit. We can ensure our children learn in clean schools. We can prioritize Black student success. We can center parent voice and demand full transparency. We can create a Chicago public school system where every child can walk to an excellent neighborhood school. I think that public education is the backbone of our society, that the investments we make in our schools reflect our values writ large. And it is beyond time to give every child the education they deserve. I am the person that can bring the insight and the experience and the dedication and values that can deliver for our future. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Maggie. Appreciate that. Yes, you're getting lots of claps. So again, people raise your hand if you have questions, or please put questions. Ann Williams, why don't you unmute yourself? It sounds like you have a question.
I was frantically typing, trying to put the question in. I'm going to take this chance to thank everyone for being here, the participants as well as the candidates. It's so unbelievable to me that we're actually talking about the school board in Chicago. It's really surreal and awesome, and I'm excited. So my question really is going to be, Maggie, for you. You've touched on some of these things, but I'd hope that all the candidates can specifically just kind of delineate where and how they have interfaced with the Chicago Public Schools, whether it's LSC, as a parent advocate in an organized group, if you're a parent, just how you've interfaced. And Maggie, you already answered that, but I guess I would have that as a standing question for all the people as candidates today, because when we were creating this school board legislation over the years, that was something that was important to all of us. So thank you.
Oh, go ahead, Maggie. Do you want to answer that?
Sure. So, at my own kid's school, I've been on the LSC many, many times. As Representative Williams knows, I have filed innumerable witness slips and requested many, many, many meetings with state legislatures on so many bills. With Raise Your Hand, I've worked across actually citywide in every district of Chicago, and then specifically in District 2, the schools where I've been the most active in terms of being inside the school, advocating for kids, include Mosaic, Budlong, Chappelle, Volta. I do it at the elementary school level right now because I'm not confident enough yet in my knowledge around differentiation at the high school level, but I am still getting that training. So hopefully we'll be able to help out at places like Senn and Amundsen and many of our other schools as well.
I know another question we have is about equitable resources. What do equitable resources look like for you?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of Hibbard. My kid's school actually shares a campus with Edison Regional Gifted Center. which is the elementary school that serves all of the north and northwest sides of the city. So I partner with parents that are in, the selective enrollment elementary school. And so many of them in conversations, they would love to be able to just walk their kid down the block to their neighborhood school, but the schools are not equipped to offer their students the education that they need and the differentiation within the classroom that they would need to stay engaged. And so I think most parents share the goal of having every neighborhood school be excellent and be able to provide all those things. And that over time and, working with limited funds, over time, you can start to make those shifts without harming any kids. They're tough decisions, but, I think that ensuring that we're making smart decisions, especially if there's so many policy things. I won't get too wonky. I promise I won't talk about legacy and normal pension contributions beyond just saying those words. But there are quite a few policy shifts that are really easy and can be made immediately. And I think having the knowledge of what those are and the savvy to get them accomplished is also a big, important role for board members.
Great, thank you. Not seeing any hands. Oh, I do. Go ahead, James.
Great. Thanks, Eileen. And thanks, Maggie, for your presentation. Really appreciate it. So I know that you had mentioned just briefly tackling the deficit was important to you. That's one of the issues that I think is most important for the district. I think we're facing about a $400 million deficit in 25. That could go up to about $700 million the next year, depending on the federal funds sunsetting. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about specific actions you would take to help address the deficit.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest one that we could do is correct what is the current way that the state funds teachers' pensions statewide. The legacy contributions they make to every other school district in the state except Chicago every year. We have a dedicated property tax for that. That's $640 million that would become available to Chicago schools immediately were we to facilitate a compromise and have the CTU pension merged with the state pension. It would be easier to do that than to try to get it passed through legislation, as I'm sure many of your elected officials can tell you. And there's quite a few ancillary benefits, so I think it would be very doable. I also think there's a lot of revenue generation opportunities at the school level. At Disney, they rent out their roof for a telecom. Some schools rent out their parking lots. I think we need to start partnering with small businesses and community groups and figure out more creative ways to generate outside and external revenue through partnerships for our district-wide, not at the individual school level, because that does not come out equitably.
All right, thanks for your response. I really appreciate that. Obviously, consolidation of the pension funds is a big lift, but one that is worth considering. I know that that was part of the school funding reform a couple of years ago, but they were able to address legacy pension. So interesting response. Thank you, though.
Okay, I have another question from Paul Rosenfeld. Past boards have levied the maximum allowed property tax they can. Would you continue this policy?
Yes. I mean, I don't see a way for us to reduce the money going into Chicago public school system. That's just not a reasonable expectation. I don't think we need to increase property taxes. I think we need to find, again, reasonable solutions. And also having an elected board means, I mean, I don't know how many of you have ever heard legacy and normal pension contributions discussed in like a Chicago Tribune article, but I've never seen it, right? So having this elected board, having people who can lobby for this, who have constituents that can create awareness and develop public support around something, I think makes a big difference, right? In accomplishing tasks. It's easy to argue against something when you don't ever have to say anything. It becomes a lot harder to continue to advocate for certain things when the rest of the voting public and the constituents involved understand what's going on.
Thank you. Would you vote to close selective enrollment high schools?
No, sorry. No, I don't really need to go into it, but no.
Okay. Would you accept the endorsement of INCS, the charter school lobby?
No.
Okay, those were from Coleman McJesse. And what would be a quick win that you see for CPS that this new school board could implement?
Yeah, so because I've been involved in passing 8 school level budgets, or 7, I guess, actually, school level budgets, I understand there's a really significant flaw in the way special education funding is allocated every year. It removes outgoing students from the total calculation, but does not project for incoming students and for newly identified IEPs, which means that every year we lose 3 to 6 sped positions. And then halfway through the year, we get the funding back and we have to rehire. It's bad for everybody involved. It's bad for students. It's bad for teachers. It is incredibly untenable and disruptive. And that's a very simple policy fix that could immediately address an issue that impacts some of the more marginalized groups within the CPS system, and make it so kids can learn, which I feel like is a very low bar for performance. So.
Okay, thank you. And for our last question, Zach, you want to ask your question?
Thanks, Ms. Dordick. And sorry, Maggie, I'm doing dinner time and
No problem.
like for the 3 wackadoos over here. So as a parent at Waters and a former board member, LLC member, community member there and at Audubon, I totally understand the unique position that school plays. But I'm going to ask just out of rank self-interest on this. And I think, maybe a little bit more representative too of the 47th Ward school network, writ large, which is different, primarily in the 4th district than it is just in the 2nd, which has allowed us to really attract and retain a lot of families. I have 2 kids there. We'll soon send a 3rd. And it's, a reason that I think middle class and, families stay in the city and feel that they can rather than run out to the burbs. So considering, the equity component that we know is going to be a focus of any of this, how would you help hold thriving schools like Waters and others harmless in that discussion so that we're not punishing schools like that for the success that they found? And, again,
okay, Zach, we got to let her
community.
answer because we're almost out of time.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, Waters is an excellent school. I have numerous friends whose kids go there. They have a great education system. If anything else, the model of funding for Waters is the same as for Hibbard, so Hibbard might get more Title I, or Waters probably doesn't get any Title I funding, but we might get more English language funding. We probably don't get more SPED funding, right? So there's a lot of ways that the funding calculation, the complexity around school funding, I think is challenging to dive into, at least in a 15-minute interview. But I would rather work with Waters and partner with them and build networks within our districts and build community across schools to really, have those opportunities for accountability for an elected office and to learn for things that work. The reason we have Wilson for dyslexic kids at Hibbard is because of Bell, right? It's not I'm sorry, I had to stop talking.
Okay.
I can answer in more detail if you want to follow up.
Thank you, Maggie. Thank you so much. I didn't mean to be rude to cut you off.
No,
I
that's
just want to
okay.
make sure everybody gets the same amount of time. Thank you so much, everybody. I'm sure. Thank you very much for your presentation, Maggie Cullerton Hooper. All right. We are moving on now to Ebony DeBerry. So Ebony, we're going to pin you. And there she is. Welcome, Ebony. Okay, we're going to start. We're going to give you 5 or so minutes, and then we'll leave 10 minutes at the end to be able to ask you questions. So welcome and go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me this evening. Um, Really, all about me is I was raised by a single mother in Rogers Park, and I attended public schools that fully supported me. I went to Gale Elementary School and graduated from Sullivan High School. I still live in Rogers Park, and I began my career as an elementary school teacher. I served for about 8 years as a teacher and then really stepped away to give my own son the time and energy that I felt he needed. And when I went back to education, I served in youth work. So I worked with out of school children, older children, and after school programming. Really love that work. And I've been an organizer at One Northside for the past 10 years. In that work, I've been able to work with Grow Your Own Teachers, which is it's really a scholarship program that takes non-traditional people of color and puts them in the classroom as teachers. So a lot of paraprofessionals and SECAs have gone back to school to become teachers. And we've seen this model be super successful because those folks are from the community. They understand the job. They have the experience in the classrooms. And I know from my own experience in elementary school, having teachers of color really built my confidence, really helped me feel supported and understood, and really helped me develop a dream for becoming a teacher myself. And so I believe having teachers of color is so important. I've also had the opportunity to work with a program called Parent Mentors, and that is a volunteer program that puts parents in the classrooms to support teachers and teachers and students so that parents really have an idea of what's going on in the schools. They've become a part of the community, and they give our teachers the support that they've always needed. 30 students in a classroom is a lot of work for one individual. And so we've seen a lot of parents build their own capacity and power by supporting kids. And it really helps students feel seen and acknowledged in the community, because a lot of times they don't see their teachers in community, but they see other kids' parents. And so that has been my great opportunity to work with that program. I love that work. Over the years as an organizer, I've been able to help local schools fill student fill designations for the PAC program and also for LSCs. So really looking for parents who want to step up and support their schools. And I believe that, our parents and our community members are the closest to the issues. And so when we give those folks the tools, they will create the strategies and priorities for the schools and build better schools that will support our communities. I believe our schools are hubs, and that lots of supports should come from our schools. And so I just enjoy doing the community work and working with parents because I was given so much through my community of Rogers Park and through my public school experience. And so right now, dealing with parents and 8 schools, about 55 parents working in 8 different schools here on the north side and Rogers Park, in Uptown and Edgewater, and Ravenswood. And that really gives me the idea of how our schools are performing, how each school is its own community and has its own culture, and how we're doing a lot of things right. And that makes me feel really excited about this opportunity to run for elected school board.
Great. Thank you so much, Ebony. I really appreciate you introducing yourself to us. So now we have time for some questions. I'm going to set the question timer. So anybody who would like to, and people who've already asked, feel free to ask again. We can certainly get you started on what does equitable resources mean to you?
I believe that the new funding model is trying to take care of a lot of that. I believe all of our schools should have counseling services. I believe all of our schools should have arts, music, gym, librarians, the things that children look forward to going to school for, and also the supports that bring our children up. We know that poverty is often violence, and poverty is really a stressor on our kids. And so if they need tutoring, if they need counseling, those things should be provided. Every school has its own formula for how much of that is needed, and equitable means that the need is met in every school.
Great, thank you. So we have the question of, would you vote to close selective enrollment high schools?
No, never. My child is a beneficiary of selective enrollment schools. He started at Gale like me, but he was a different kind of student, and he wanted to ride the bus very young. He told me he wanted to ride the bus, so I had him tested, and he attended Disney and graduated from Northside College Prep.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, James.
Thanks so much for your presentation, Ebony. Really appreciate it. So I know you talked a lot about empowering parents. Could you speak a little bit more about some of the policy prescriptions that you could implement to help bridge the gap between the board and parents to make sure that their voices are being heard?
Absolutely. I believe we just need more transparency, and we also need to celebrate more what's working. And so I think a lot of parents feel, especially poor parents and parents of color, feel like a school is not necessarily a place they belong or where they have voice. A lot of times those parents feel like the experts are the people in those buildings, and a lot of our schools don't make parents feel welcome. And so I think access has to be given. I think parents with the privilege of knowing how to push on those levers could share the benefit of their knowledge. I think that real conversations could be had throughout the city about what's already working and how to leverage that on behalf of the schools that aren't working well right now.
Okay. Is that good, James?
Yeah, thanks. I was wondering too if there's would you change like any format for like, I guess, having additional forums with parents and the board, or anything structurally different? It sounds like there's a lot of conversation to be had, but I was just curious if there's any more specific policy mechanism.
I don't know about policy necessarily. I think that we need to ask the people what they need. You know, I think that there are a lot of parents that feel very empowered, and we can find out from them how those structures are working in order to supply those structures. And I think there needs to be a lot of education. There are some parents that are well-informed, that know how all the structures work, what an LSC does, what a PAC does, you know, how the powers of a principal. And a lot of our parents don't know those things. And so if we got them up to speed, we could have such a wonderful opportunity to bring the best to every school, I do believe. And it's going to take a lot of conversations, and it's going to take a lot of cross-pollination. I think that's what we really need. We really need to get away from the structure that we've had, the haves and the have-nots. And so how do we break that down?
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for clarifying that, Ebony. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Okay. We got a new question. How do you envision the role interfacing working with your local elected officials and state? Oh, Anne, I'm sorry. Do you want to ask this yourself, Anne Williams?
No, this is fine if you do.
Okay. How do you see your role as interacting with your alders, your county commissioners, state reps, et cetera, Ebony?
Yeah, so as an organizer, I get to work with elected officials a lot right now, and I have the privilege of understanding what's in their power and what's not necessarily in their power, and I communicate a lot of those messages with parents, but also I encourage parents to create their own relationships with their elected officials and really try to create as much face time and ask as many questions as possible. I think their community meetings are always a good first step, but also I think we need to create either quarterly, some kind of, interaction where both parties get to tell their own side of the story in terms of what's happening with our public school system. You know what I mean? I think there's a lot of guessing and a lot of presuming that needs to really be shut down. And so I think more interaction would be best.
Thank you. Past boards have levied the maximum allowed property tax that they can. Would you continue this policy?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Past school boards have levied the maximum allowed property tax that is possible. Would you continue this policy?
No, that we have to find more sustainable models. I'm a homeowner myself, and I see my taxes going up and they're crushing me. So I feel like we have to really go to the state and ask for more. And if that isn't working fast enough, we may even have to interact with the government, because the federal government, because we cannot keep sustaining our school system on the backs of working class and middle class folks. We have to find other revenues, more progressive revenues.
Okay, thank you. There was another question about what would be a quick win for CPS? So when your new school board starts, if you win this race, what would be a quick win that you would like to see, or you could see really happening for the school board?
I don't imagine there'll be any quick wins. I think that this is going to take time. I really want to see what this new funding model is going to unravel for all of us. But I would like to see buses return as soon as possible. My own child was able to attend a selective enrollment school because busing was provided. I think busing is a way to really keep the cultural diversity of our selective enrollment schools. It's also a way for our neurodivergent learners to get to where they need to be. And so we have to figure out the busing issue.
Thanks. Okay. Rinda, go ahead.
Thanks. Hi, Ebony, and thank you so much for your presentation. As a former teacher myself, I'm going to speak to you as a former teacher and ask, how do you think that elected school board members, especially since you have a distinct district, and it's not like, the appointed school board where you're responsible for the whole city, but you will have that, that capacity to focus on a distinct district. How do you see yourself relating to teachers?
I have no issue relating to teachers. I love working with teachers. Teachers are some of the best people I know. I've been a teacher, and so I don't feel like it should be parents win and teachers lose. I don't feel like it should be a binary. I feel like a lot of our teachers are invested in our public school system, send their children to public schools. And so I want to see our teachers supported. I want to see them cared for. I want to see that whatever negotiations that are for the good of all of our city and children are worked out. I'm in full support of our teachers. I want to see class sizes minimized however we can, and I really just want our students to get the best benefit of going to public school. And that means teachers that are reliable and that we can depend on and that like their work and want to come to work.
Great, thank you. There's a question about the new funding model, taking away some positions from some schools, like significant numbers of positions like Walter Payton versus other schools. And, maybe you can speak to your opinions on that as far as how the new funding model is working so far.
So I see the question. I'm hearing from folks that this is happening. I think that It's not set in stone. I think that we've seen positions be lost and returned in previous years. I am very hopeful that the new funding model will meet the needs of the greatest amount of students in our city. I really believe that. I think that selective enrollment schools are very strong, are very creative, have the most productive stakeholders. And I have full belief that we'll figure out ways to maintain what's been good about selective enrollment schools, and they will continue to thrive.
Great. Thank you so much, Ebony. Our time is up. Thank you very much for all your answers to our questions. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, now we are moving on to our next candidate, Kate Doyle. So Kate, take time to introduce yourself and then we'll come back for questions.
Thanks so much. So I'm Kate Doyle. I am so honored to be running for the 2nd District on the Chicago Board of Education. Anne said this early on. This is a historic moment and an exciting one. We've been waiting for this to happen for some time. But I think it's really important that we're thinking about how we shape this new public service position and make sure it has a true emphasis on community voice. So I'm running for the school board because I believe we deserve a qualified, progressive, and independent community member representing us on the board. And that's what you're going to get with me. I am a mom to a soon-to-be CPS kid, a current CPS playground enthusiast. I am also a former special education teacher and the leader of a nonprofit that does career training for young people. I care deeply about our public schools, and I love that our mandate is to welcome and nurture any child that walks through those doors. I got my start as a public school teacher, teaching in a high needs high school out in New York City in Brooklyn. I earned my graduate degree in special education and developed a specialization in social emotional learning. I was a proud AFT UFT member during my time in the classroom. I left the classroom and I went to work in the corporate tech sector. My proudest accomplishment while I was leading a number of community engagement programs was I built and led a national initiative to help veterans and transitioning service members and military spouses gain access to high-paying roles in the tech sector. And that's what gave me my first taste of workforce development, which is what I do now. I'm the founder of an award-winning youth-serving workforce development nonprofit. We work with out-of-work and out-of-school young people. And first and foremost, what we do is we help them regain their confidence. We help them access career training, and then we connect them to full-time employment in the tech sector. I'm really proud to say that we placed 90% of our graduates. So we're doing just as well, if not better, than a lot of colleges across this country. And it's through these experiences, classroom, corporate, and also running this nonprofit that I've had the opportunity to work with hundreds of young people. And I think that with every passing year, I have become more and more concerned about what's not happening in our K-12 continuum here in Chicago, and in fact, across the country when it comes to gearing our students for true post-secondary success. So I wanted to run for the board because I think we need an innovator who is going to think about how, as a district, do we push all of our graduates to post-secondary success. And that means a fulfilling life after graduation. So I want to see more pre-apprenticeships that lead to great union jobs in the trades. I want to see increased support for the Chicago Roadmap, which is an initiative between CPS and the City College of Chicago. I want to see more robust partnerships for our students with significant disabilities so that they can go on to supported programs in the community. This is a big project, and it's going to take bold leadership to orient the district in this way to be truly future ready and also to sustain it. And it starts on the continuum all the way from high quality preschool access in every neighborhood to enhancing our advanced coursework for our high school students. And I'm in this because I want to make sure that all of our kids can thrive. I really think we can be a district that figures this out, but I think we need a leader in District 2 who's going to take a thoughtful and collaborative and service-minded leadership approach. And I'm ready to get to work and do that. I'm going to do this with the same approach that I take to everything I do. Step one, I always actively listen. I will be in the community. I will be accessible. I will be responsive. I do my homework. Working families are really busy. They need to know that their representative is taking care of business, and I'm going to get stuff done. I am not going to be bogged down by any favors owed, and I'm going to work with urgency for our kids. And I've been trying to prove that to voters over the last couple of months since I announced my run. So over the last few months, I've collected 4,800 signatures. I've raised $35,000. I've recruited dozens of volunteers. I've received early endorsements from NDFA and the Moms Demand Action Gun Sense distinction. And I'm running to win because I believe I'm the best fit for District 2 and the type of leader that is going to build partnerships, be collaborative, be a responsible and resourceful leader. And I'm ready to get to work.
Great. Thank you so much, Kate. We appreciate it. The timer's going to go off in a second, so I'm going to catch that first. All right, now we have time for questions. So we can start off with, what does equitable resources mean to you?
Yeah, so equitable resources, I think what underpins this is the understanding that different students might need different things. And so we're a district that serves hundreds of thousands of low-income students. We have thousands of students in our special education programs, thousands of English language learners, thousands of students in temporary living situations. And those students typically need more resourcing. And so equity is really about directing those resources to where they need it the most. So when we think about things like the discussion around neighborhood schools versus selective enrollment schools, I think we've somehow gotten a little lost because our selective enrollment schools are actually quite cost effective. It's in fact a lot of our schools that need more resourcing where the cost per student is much higher. But I'm in support of that work because we do need to resource all of those schools to meet the needs of our students. And I think that the shift in this year's budget is ultimately a good thing. I think there's been some serious bumps in the road. I'm glad that Paul brought up some of the positions we lost at Peyton. There's certainly been a lot of angst, I think, from a lot of parents. And I think that with a new elected board, as we see the budget for school year 25-26, I mean, one, we're going to release it sooner. We are not going to wait until July to release it. And two, we're going to look at it with a more fine-tooth comb to make sure that we're not impacting our selective enrollment and our magnet schools. We need to resource all of our schools.
Thank you. I want to make sure to get this one in. Would you accept the endorsement of the INCS, the charter school lobby?
I'm not actively pursuing that, and I think I wouldn't accept a public endorsement. I do think that I'm somebody, when I think about public charter schools, I think it's important to remember how many there are in Chicago and that it's actually the board members' responsibility to oversee them, both their renewal process and ensure that they're operating to a high standard. So I'm somebody who really believes in school efficacy. And so when it comes to a high-performing charter school, that's not the first place I'm going to direct my attention as somebody who cares about student outcomes. And so, yeah, I think that probably not.
Okay, thank you. Raise hands if you want to ask questions. I know we also have the past boards have levied the maximum allowed property tax they can. Would you continue this policy?
So I think this year we have renewed at the maximum cap. For next year, ideally, I would like us to seek new revenue sources so we don't have to do that. I think we need to collaborate with Springfield, not fight with Springfield, to see if there's any way that we can, bring our evidence-based funding to us sooner. I think that there's, Maggie brought up a good point earlier about creative solutions to the teacher pension. A lot of other districts don't have to pay for their pension. And I think that, there might be other areas that the board can collaborate on in terms of like citywide referendums and other mechanisms to bring new revenue to CPS. Ultimately, I think the deficit is largely a revenue problem, although I think it's also driven by some expenditure issues, which is something that as a board member, I would want to call to have a pretty comprehensive audit right away so that we can look in particular at our procurement system, which is pretty ancient, and there's a lot of inefficiency there. And I think we would find that we could save some money that we can redirect back to our classrooms.
Okay, thank you. Sarah Feigenholz, would you like to clarify anything that is still outstanding in your question? Because I think Kate addressed some of it.
Nope, all good. She did a
Okay.
great job. Thanks.
Great. Okay, thanks. All right. We have we talked about the new funding model, taking positions away. I think you addressed that a little bit. But do you have any other thoughts on that that you'd like to let us know about?
Yeah, I think it just bears repeating. I think that, we've got some really amazing programming with our selective enrollment and magnet schools. It's something we should be proud of. I'd like to see our selective enrollment schools be more representative of CPS demographics. I think we have a top of funnel issue with applications. I think Ebony brought up a great point that we need to restore busing for gen ed students, particularly for our selective enrollment and magnet students at an elementary school level. Because that impacted primarily low income students. 85% of the kids on those buses were low income. And now, some have moved away from those schools. So I think when it comes to positions being cut, again, selective enrollment are pretty cost effective. And so I think that looking at the funding model and seeing why and where, I know this also happened at classical schools, for example, Decatur, which is in District 2, saw a number of positions on the chopping block as well. And the school leader there was able to work some budget magic, but they're still going to lose a teacher position or two. And it's a classical program. So those teachers are sort of essential to delivering on the mission of the school. So I take issue with that.
Anne, go ahead.
Oh, hi there. I'm having some technical.
Oh, you're good. We hear
No,
you.
that's okay. So, hi, Kate. Thank you for being here. Appreciate your overview. I just wanted to ask the same question I've asked the others today. And what specific interface and experiences have you had with Chicago Public Schools specifically?
Yeah, so my nonprofit does resume workshops and interview prep for CPS students in partnership with community-based programs. I also participate in community initiatives with CPS, for example, the strategic planning process. I participated in those forums so I could be up to date. I volunteer at school events in my neighborhood, both at Waters and at Budlong. And then I am also part of a neighborhood association that participates in mutual aid to some families who are new arrivals who have CPS students. And we've been pretty involved with those families and helping them onboard to the CPS experience. And then lastly, sort of at my kitchen cabinet, I have a lot of CPS teachers and principals and school staff who are sharing their advice, opinions, and insights with me to really keep me informed on what's going on in our schools.
Thank you. Kate, I'm wondering if you could talk about your experience with budgeting. Do you have experience with budgeting?
Yeah, certainly. So I have experience with budgeting both in the corporate sector and in the nonprofit sector. So in the corporate sector, I manage budgets of up to $30 million. For my nonprofit, I am the CEO. So I oversee our annual budget process. We also do strategic planning and financial forecasting. We raise around $750,000 annually from a variety of sources, philanthropic funders, government contracts, subcontracts, and all of that requires a lot of thoughtfulness and diligence and close partnership with our CPA firm. So I feel very comfortable managing and overseeing budgets.
Great, thank you. I don't know if we asked you explicitly if you would, how you feel about selective enrollment schools.
I feel great about them. I think there are some world-class programs, and I think we need to continue to resource them. I personally plan on sending my son to neighborhood schools at this point. I live by a great neighborhood school, Waters, and I think it's going to be a good fit for our family. If I didn't feel that way about the school I lived by, I would look into other public options. And so very respectful of the choices that families are making for their kids.
Great, thank you. All right, well, we are just about out of time. So unless there's any more questions, great. Thank you so much, Kate. We
Thank you.
appreciate
I
it.
appreciate it.
Excellent. Okay, so now we have Daniel Kleinman, who is next. Welcome, Daniel. So you now go ahead and unmute yourself, and you have 5 minutes to introduce yourself, and then we'll ask you questions.
Thank you so much. Wow. Yeah, the 47th Ward. So this is touching to me. I was working with a former alderman, Alderman Pawar of the 47th Ward. And at the time, he wanted to establish block clubs. And I was commissioned, so to speak, to help organize forums that would plan block clubs. And I saw online that some of those block clubs still exist. And that is touching to me. That is really touching to me. It signifies what I believe should be the leadership of CPS. Block clubs are methods to create accountability, which I argue are the local school councils and the local school councils of every school. They promote the community voice, just like the block clubs of old. And I believe that CPS needs to engage its stakeholders in a way that listens and not tells. And this is what makes me the best independent progressive candidate here, because I have a vision for the future and I have a history of what I've done towards that goal my whole career. I'm running on 3 pillars, and these 3 pillars guide my independent leadership. They're not pillars that I talk about, they're pillars I do. What I've always done, and I'll continue to do. I will promote transparency. I will tell my constituents who I meet with and what I say. Just as I've done, this will continue on my blog. I will fight for accountability to those local school councils. This will create legitimacy. With that, we can create a strategic plan with a bold ambition that I believe we could rally around. A diploma from CPS should be a golden ticket to any student's next step. College, skilled trades, directly into the workforce. I've been fighting this my whole career. Some 12 years ago, I was a policy director of a terrific nonprofit coalition that created a model for working professionals to give back to their communities by returning to college with a scholarship to get a teacher's certificate and teach in a classroom of their neighborhood. I was privileged to go down with the team for Springfield to lobby for what is called Grow Your Own Teachers and winning funding for that 3 years in a row at its founding. I hear it's still going and I hear it's still going strong, and it is truly, truly an honor to have been part of that. Now I serve as grant writer for a workforce development nonprofit in North Lawndale on the west side, connecting residents to union apprenticeship programs, job trainings, and especially the hardest hit, like those with criminal history. So yes, I did start as a community organizer, but quickly as I ran and won my local school council election to Senn High School, Rahm Emanuel was elected. And in my term there, I saw what happens when 50 schools are closed overnight. I know what it felt like to march against these improbable happenings. I remember cheering for G2 Brown during his hunger strike. And I remember what it looked like from my chair years on, when it was so obvious to see the places where these schools were now crime hotspots. And that's the difference that I think we need to tackle. I was elected, secondly, to Disney Magnet Elementary, where we had a budget ample enough to afford new staff, generate revenue, vote for property income like telecommunication towers on our roofs. But we had donors. We had funds set up to us, and not every school has that. Of note, I do believe, funding comes up. Disney was able to fund a new air conditioner. And if you know schools, that's terrible. So many schools don't have great air conditioning in the hot months or heating in the cold months, and Disney was able to afford it. And I do believe that the new school board should argue vehemently with the city that TIF surplus dollars should be made available to the infrastructure costs of our buildings. And I believe that's actually a money saver. But serving in a school that had, we were able to hire a social worker. And I know the benefit of that. Growing up with a mental health disability, I was placed in a special education classroom with a social worker on hand, and I would not have graduated without that. I know for certain that wraparound services work, and that is why I'll continue to fight for them. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. You and the timer went off at exactly the same time. Okay, we will go ahead and go to our questions. Why don't we start off with the question that we've been asking everybody about equitable resources and what equitable resources look like to you?
Thank you. I believe equitable resources describe a reality. Reality that I just touched on. I was a more expensive student, right? A classroom that I was placed in had a teacher, 2 teaching assistants, a social worker on hand, a librarian that would come and visit and walk you through books. Not every kid has that. Not every kid needs that. And so I believe this is where the strategic planning has to come from. It has to come from the notion of what do these individual kids need? And that should start at the kindergarten level on. Go ahead.
Great. I do want to see if you will accept the endorsement of the INSCS Charter School Lobby.
No, I wouldn't expect it,
Okay.
but no.
All
Thank you.
right, thank you. People raise your hands if you want to ask some questions. We certainly have, Anne, why don't you go ahead and ask your question?
Oh, thank you and welcome, Daniel. My
Thank
question
you.
is, I heard you say you were involved with, I think, Disney. Were you on the LSC there, or what has been your interfacing with CPS specifically?
Yes, thank you. No, it was a privilege. I was on the LSC for 4 years, including the 2 in COVID. It was a joy. It was a joy of my life. I lived down the block. And for my wife and I got married and wanted to purchase a home for us. And around Disney was a little out of our price range. So we moved further north towards Rogers Park. And now I'm delighted that, God willing, my future child, God willing, will attend Swift Elementary across the street.
So just to clarify, you were a community rep on the LSCs.
Yes, community rep on Senn High School in Edgewater and Walt Disney Magnet in Uptown.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Just everybody who is on the chat is allowed to ask a question. It does not have to be just somebody from the ward organization. Feel free to put it in the text or send it to me in the message or put it in the chat, and then I'll call on you. Well, Brooke, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yes, sorry. And I apologize to everyone that I'm late. But thank you, Daniel. And I did make it for your whole intro. I am currently on the LSC at Coonley Elementary School. And I know you mentioned LSCs, which I appreciate as a longtime LSC member. How do you plan to engage LSCs specifically? I guess, what are some ways that you would engage those that are in your district?
Yeah, to me, it's easy. The chairpersons would have my cell phone number. There would be monthly caucus meetings or quarterly caucus meetings, a time that is established when, I would be present and members of local school councils able to provide their feedback and their oversight on what I was doing would be respect. And that's the same thing that, that I did. I would get responses from neighborhood, from parents, from teachers' assistants on my blog. They would read what I was saying and they would respond. And you know, it's got to be that and more. It's got to be that and more. Yeah. Thank
We'll
you.
go back to a question we asked other candidates. There is a deficit of 400 million before CTU contracts. What are your ideas to pay the debt and the looming 600 million debt next year? And yeah, and then also, I guess, address, well, I'll ask you about the property tax after that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think this question actually plays to one of my strengths, which is convincing Springfield to act. I think CPS is in a position, not just leadership transition, which is obvious. Well, I guess, you know, the mayor's office releasing the tax burden at the time, I think was poorly advised. I think that there needs to be a process to phase in the programs and changes that are happening administratively from the top that need to then reflect to the bottom. So my plan would be to look at municipal allies, bonds if needed. I personally, you know, I wouldn't touch taxes until we had something to prove. You know, when people, if there are people saying, yeah, now this is worth it. That's, I think, where I'd stand. Yeah.
Do you have any budgeting experience?
Yeah. So it comes in from the nonprofit world. Well, actually, I guess corporate as well. You know, I was a corporate paralegal for 4 years. And I was with a firm that was going through acquisition from IBM. So that was a large budget that I had to comb through, the IBM subsidiary, large budget to come through to audit, essentially. And more individually, more personally, just as a career nonprofit writer, I mean, my job has always been grants. My job has always been writing budgets that are forward-looking but realistic, and conveying them in a way that gets them approved.
Great. Let's see. Would you support closing selective enrollment schools?
No.
Okay. So we can ask you, and Anne put this in the chat, so the other candidates, if you would also answer this maybe in the chat, if you do have any. So Daniel, do you have any endorsements from organizations or elected officials? And Ebony and Maggie, if you can answer that in the chat, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I actually started several months ago, and I made the decision that I really wanted to focus on voter contact. And so I did. I wanted to have something to show that I was a legitimate candidate before trying to dive into the deep end, as we all have. So once I started to have some numbers, I started to share around. Right now, I didn't earn the endorsement I'm very proud of, Northside Democracy for America. And in the individual level, Congressional Committee Woman Carol Ronan has endorsed me at that level and that geographic, as the congressional district is large and District 2 is large. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for your time, Daniel. So appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Wait, I'm just gonna look. Okay, great. Thank you very much. And now for our last candidate of the evening, we have Bruce Leon. So welcome, Bruce. And you have 5 minutes to introduce yourself, and then we'll ask you some questions.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me okay, Aileen? Okay.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you guys for hosting this. My name is Bruce Leon. I am, among other things, the 50th Ward Committeeman. I am a mentee of Paul Rosenfeld. He has been a great mentor for me in the committee, becoming a good committee man. As you know, our ward gets about 5,900 votes. The 47th gets about 14,000. because you guys are completely engaged and you do an amazing job. And I compliment you on that. And it's great to talk to the first group I'm speaking to is probably one of the most engaged boards in the city. And you guys should all feel proud about that. Real quickly, I just want to give you a little synopsis of my background. I'm a little bit unique in this race and how I got into it. I'm a fifth generation Chicagoan. I was born in East Rogers Park, but I was raised in Highland Park. So I'm a product of the suburban schools. I did raise my family in West Rogers Park, 4 daughters. I've got 6 grandchildren. My business experience is that I started a company in 1997 called Tandem HR. We did HR outsourcing for small and mid-sized businesses, which I love. I'm an entrepreneur at heart. We grew the business from 2 employees to about 150. Did about $1.4 billion in payroll. I sold the company to a Chicago private equity firm, the majority of it in 2020, and have been on the board as they've grown it into a national model. During that time, I did work. Tandem did have a niche working with schools out in the western suburbs with some of the consulting work that we did. Also, some of the charter schools. And I got to know a little bit about sort of what the issues were. I guess if I could summarize the message I'd like to give today is I come from a background of strong board leadership. I've been on a publicly traded board. I've currently served on 2 fairly large boards, including Tandem HR's. What I've learned from serving on boards is that the best boards are diversified. When we started Tandem HR's board, when it was bought by the private equity firm, I learned so much. Actually, they sent us to Northwestern to learn how to become great board members. And of the 11 board members, only 3 of them really knew much about the HR outsourcing business when we started. They were just really smart people. One was a number 2 guy at Avis. One was a high-ranking person at Microsoft, new technology. What we really learned was to have a great board, you need to have strong people that have different specialties and can bring a lot of value to a board on a big level. In the beginning, I worked with the 50th Ward and trying to figure out, wasn't necessarily my intention to jump into this race, but at the end of the day, after what we gave it some thought, is that there's a feeling that we need to have strong board members that can stand up and fight for the rights of both the local schools and for just making the Chicago school system a great world-class school system. And I think I bring that board experience. For instance, one of my specialties is efficiency management. I am pretty confident in the best of companies, we can save 3%. In companies we've done with schools in the past, we've actually found 7 to 8% low-hanging fruit. That's $1 billion, a $14 billion budget. I also need to share that, there has been some people in our ward, and I'm sure in throughout the district too, that have felt a little bit intimidated, have students that have been intimidated that are in public schools. I don't believe there's any room for racism or intimidation of any student, regardless of their religion or their ethnic background. So I guess my pillars are, I'm coming to this with the idea that parental involvement is key in any organization. It has to start with the parents and the LSCs and move upward, but the board should not be focused on minute things like basketball nets being ripped in a gym or we have instruments. The board should be focused. It's a $14 billion budget. It's got to think in a very global sense, how we can compete with the suburbs, how we can compete with other states that also have very competitive school systems. And we don't want people leaving the city. We want people to stay in the city. So I want to bring my board experience to help better the board. And again, I would say that my pillars are about parent involvement. I'm into equity. and I do believe in diversity. And I just want to make one last comment, which is
Oh,
to think about the
sorry,
fact that
Bruce.
there's 21.
Okay, just finish
Okay.
up and then we'll get to questions.
Okay, there's 21 board members, 11 are going to be picked and appointed from a pretty non-diverse background. There's CTU is endorsing candidates in every division, so very likely you're going to have 15 to 16 candidates that come from a very similar background. I mean, it's a big ask to ask the District 2 to think globally. I personally think it would be great if we could have had all 47 people and people could have voted for 10 and just diversified within the whole city, but we can't. So I guess my ask is to think about what District 2 board person could be that would be different, bring something different to the table than might be for the other 21 board members, which all come from a very similar background.
Okay, thank
I
you.
guess that's it.
So if you could answer for us, what's been your involvement with Chicago Public Schools so far?
So other than in the fact that my company consulted with them, my involvement with public schools has been, I have a daughter that's a speech therapist in the public schools, but at this point, and I have a daughter that's a teacher but not in the CPS, and someone else is a teacher. So as far as Chicago Public Schools, I've only been working as a committeeman on some of the more global issues that face the city, and not specifically on the LSC level.
Okay, thank you. Also, would you close or reduce funding to selective enrollment schools?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I see Decatur School in our neighborhood, and I've talked to parents there, and we're 6 blocks from Evanston. If we close selective schools, we will have parents move to the suburbs. We need to have a competitive school system that's equitable to all, and closing schools is absolutely the worst thing, I believe.
Okay. Would you take the endorsement of the INCS?
It's
charter
early
school.
on. Lane, I appreciate the question. But I've worked with them. I have to say I've worked with Andrew Broy because I've done consulting work with them, and I do believe in the charter school system. So if in fact it was something that fit in with what I felt my constituents wanted and can help promote more equity in the school system, and his endorsement would be beneficial, I would accept it, yes.
Okay. Anybody have questions? Okay, go ahead, James.
Thanks so much for your presentation, Bruce. Really appreciate it. So you had mentioned that you've got a background and strength in efficiency management. I think you kind of implied that you could help CPS save 7% of its budget with low-hanging fruit. So can you provide some examples of what you would look into to cut? And then can you also elaborate, when you've done efficiency management before, have you worked with unionized workforces?
Yes, and I'm not talking about salaries here. Salaries are the last thing. I mean, in the HR world, we actually believe in empowering people. It's the other things. It's buying pay. Listen, I'll tell you something very specific. When I worked with certain of the school districts, and this was 20 years ago, and I understand we've done something to alleviate this, but there was something called pension spiking. This is something where administrators would take a 4-year contract in the last 4 years, and they're making, let's say, $200,000. They would take $50,000, $50,000, $50,000, and $400,000 last year, and they would get a pension based on the last year. This was the kind of thing that was going on in the school systems, and nobody was standing up and saying anything about it. Eventually, things were. I think the idea of what's already been mentioned. I've been an advocate of looking at the benefits of merging the pension systems. That's potentially hundreds of millions of dollars. I think competitive vendor. I think a lot of the savings can come from just competitive vendor pricing, and also I do like the idea of looking at ways to engage the private sector to help fund maybe technology, smart boards, whatever we can do to help the business community as an interest to make sure we get great educated students. And so I think we should look at ways that we can engage that to help offset the budget deficits, because I don't believe that we can go to people this year. I'm meeting with the city assessor of Fritz Kagi next Wednesday. There's no way that we can continue 20 to 30% property tax increase on a regular basis. It's not sustainable. So we have to look for ways to cut outside of salaries. I didn't mean that these salaries was not the point. It was in expenditures. It was trying to come up with efficiencies, getting schools to work together and buying coalitions and to try to figure out how we can save money. Again, $14 billion. If you just save 4 or 5%, you're talking real money there.
Sure. And I didn't necessarily think that you were referencing salaries. I just wanted to peel that back a little bit. So thanks for walking us through that.
Bruce, what does equitable resources look like to you?
Listen, we've heard some great things on. I think it's all about making sure that every school has an excellent, not just a baseline, but an excellent standard. I love the idea of a social workers. I have a diabetic daughter. I think there should be qualified nurses. I think there should be social workers. But I will tell you, in my viewpoint, equitable also means that I grew up in Highland Park, and I will tell you, I find it abhorrent that I went to a school that had PhDs as teachers, that paid $500,000 for administrators. I believe that we have to come up with a better funding mechanism. So equity means that the whole state pulls money together, not just New Trier and Highland Park, so that these amazing schools with like professional plays and 18 directors and choreographers. That's not fair. Equity to me means going there and being an alumni and knowing, let's say, Mayor Rodham very well. I mean, I believe we need to make a case that it's good for the whole business community. It's good for the whole state. If we have better equitable financing, it can't just be based on local neighborhood funding. I think that's it's not sustainable.
So, two questions that have been asked earlier to other candidates were, how would you work interfacing with your elected officials and with the LSCs?
Okay. Well, first of all, I just want to say this about, okay, so let's just talk about with the elected officials. I have a very good relationship already. I mean, on my committee, when I ran for the committee job, Ron Villanova is my committeeman, Deborah Silverstein, state rep Kevin Okos is on my committee. I work very well. I've been to Springfield many times in my new 2.0 life since being the CEO of a company to advocate on on different issues. So I do believe that I am one of my strengths is a builder, a consensus builder, a problem solver. I think I will just differentiate myself a little bit. I don't come from the extreme progressive mentality, although I love working with the progressives in my ward. I will say that I try to find moderate win-win situations in all situations. And I believe that we could do a better job in the city and the school systems. And it does start with engaging LSCs. And I do believe that, and I don't have a specific plan for it now, but I would assume coming up with a mechanism that we could meet regularly and hear from the LSCs what their issues are and to try to bring it upstream.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, I think, are there any other questions for Bruce? I think we asked you all the questions rapid fire. So thank you very much for all 5 of you. I think I am reflecting everybody's perspective here, that we are very fortunate to have 5 candidates who are all very qualified for this job, who have really articulated their vision, and all 5 of you are clearly very passionate about education and the Chicago Public Schools, which, like, I feel a sense of relief, not that I was worried, but I just knowing that you all are, working hard, and any one of you could do a good job representing the district too. So thank you so much for your time today. We are going to say goodbye now to, Carla, did you have something you want to say? Okay.
If it's okay, I'm a Chicago public school teacher for 28 years, and I'm also right now an instructional coach. I've worked in, I can't take off camera because I'm very passionate about this. And I am not kidding. I knew I'd start to get emotional, but I really wish a lot of people would understand the outcomes, the student outcome. I am now an instructional coach, and I'm hearing a lot of stuff about charter magnet, selective enrollment. I haven't heard anyone talk about the violence in our city and how we would fund schools all across the city to stop the violence in other parts of the school. These kids in this ward, in this district, and in another district that the 47th ward will vote for, the meeting tomorrow. We are thankful for everything we have, but when we go to different parts of the ward or the different parts of the city, it is very different. And everyone needs to open their eyes to that. We have immigrants coming in. Our school has over 250 immigrants. We're trying to get teachers who speak Spanish. It needs to be equitable. And equity means that if Coonley gets a playground, then my school that I work at in West Humboldt Park gets a playground. My question basically is people need to inform themselves of what is going on in the school. So I want to know if these candidates are going to leave their district and go to the other districts and see what CPS is all about. I've heard people talk about no differentiation.
Hey, Carla, thank you so much for
that's all I have to say.
I appreciate it, and I'm glad you said it. And I think that, you know, hopefully we're leaving all of these candidates with an issue that they can think about and maybe address as we go along. So thank you for speaking out on that. I appreciate it. Okay, we are now, Carla and Brooke are going to stay in the room, but we're going to say goodbye to all our candidates and everybody else who is not in the 47th Ward Dems. So thank you all so much again for your time and for your effort this evening. So good night, 47th Ward Dems. Stick around.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.